Hey guys, Maurice here, and I want to tell you about a great car event that's coming up May 15th through the 17th. My friends at Drive Toward a Cure invite you to join the Aliso Ranch Getaway in the Santa Barbara wine country. It's an all-inclusive getaway of cars and camaraderie for classics and exotics. 3 days and 2 nights at the premier Dude Ranch-inspired hideaway, the Aliso Guest Ranch and Resort. And in case you're not familiar with Drive Toward a Cure, they are all about focusing the car community on a great cause, which is Parkinson's research and patient care. So if you're anywhere near the Southern California area and you want to get in on a great car event, you can learn more at drivetowardacure.org. Get away to the wine country, May 15th through 17th. Once again, more details at drivetowardacure.org. Hi everybody, welcome to Horsepower Heritage. I'm Maurice Merrick, and thanks for joining me for this special bonus episode of the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about a very special collection of cars, original unrestored cars for the most part, which were lovingly acquired over a lifetime by a gentleman named Mark Smith. Unfortunately, Mark passed away suddenly last year, but he was well known in the classic car world as a lifelong collector and enthusiast who cherished distinctive artifacts and automobiles, and particularly the original stuff, because as we know, it's only original once, right? The Mark Smith Estate Auction is being held on April 7th, and that task has been entrusted to none other than Gooding & Company. So a couple of weeks ago, I got in touch with their founder, David Gooding, and asked if he'd like to sit down and do a preview of sorts, and that's exactly what we did. So what follows is a terrific conversation with David about the highlights of this sale, which represents some of the finest classics anywhere. By the way, David has been a very serious car lover since he was a boy, and we talked about how all that started as well as how he founded his business. And we also talked about the most memorable cars he's ever had the privilege of selling, some real doozies. And I've got to say, it was a great day for me spending time with David, and I recommend you follow along with us. If you go to goodingco.com, just click on the Mark Smith Estate Auction and check out these cars as we discuss them. They're very special. And by the way, we just scratched the surface. There's a ton of classic stuff in the sale and probably even a few deals to pick up. So if you're looking for an interesting and historic car, especially a pre-war car, this is a good opportunity. So stay right there, and I'll be right back with David Gooding, right here on Horsepower Heritage. Hi guys, Maurice Merrick here, and I want to give you a few things to check out at modelcitizendiecast.com. First, there's the Jaguar E-Type Lightweight from 1963. That's in 1/18 scale by Auto Art. Or how about a 1956 Alfa Romeo Giulietta Sprint, also in 1/18 scale? Or if you're into Japanese supercars, there's the Nissan Skyline GTR V-Spec in 1/18 scale. You can find these and many more scale model cars at modelcitizendiecast.com. Enter promo code HERITAGE at checkout for 10% off your order. That's a special deal for my listeners. From race cars to street cars and everything in between, it's modelcitizendiecast.com, because your inner child still wants to play with cars. Well, David Gooding, I am so pleased to be here at your offices today in Santa Monica, and we're going to be talking about the Mark Smith Estate Auction, which you're handling next month. And just a wonderful collection of original unrestored cars for the most part. It's pretty vast, but we're going to get into the catalog today, so thanks for being here.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
I know that you knew Mark Smith, and I had the pleasure of meeting him on the field at Pebble Beach in 2019 when he was showing his Rolls-Royce Town Car, again, an unrestored preservation class car. Spoke with Mark for probably about 25 minutes.
Oh, wow.
What a character.
Yeah. No, Mark, I had met Mark the first time in the 1980s. We were both a lot younger then, and what struck me certainly throughout the length that we knew each other was that I could not believe how much he knew about cars, about a number of cars, and it was from the dawn of motoring, from 1900 all the way through to contemporary cars. I didn't actually, until more recent years, realize that he had such a vast knowledge for newer cars. But then, of course, that knowledge even extended beyond cars. You could speak to him about architecture. You could speak to him about antique furniture, paintings. He was incredibly knowledgeable and had a fantastic eye for detail and of course, originality.
He was a connoisseur.
Totally, completely. He was, I think as a young man, very passionate about cars, always enjoyed them. And then, like any good car dealer, I think, did a deal on a car and realized that it was something he loved and could make money at. He was a collector first and foremost, and he was constantly trading, had a great eye.
And he didn't advertise himself, really.
No.
But if you're in the car hobby, you would know who Mark Smith was.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Well, let's get into some of these lots.
Okay.
I think that you've made some picks that you'd like to talk about, and I've done the same. So where would you like to start?
Why don't we start with the Chrysler, one of the stars of the sale?
Excellent. So what I'm going to do, David, is since you've got the auction offerings on the website,
yep.
What I'd like to do is I'll just mention the lot numbers,
sure,
so that if people want to click on goodingandcompany.com, they can follow along.
Yep.
So the first we're going to talk about is Lot 27, which is a 1932 Chrysler Imperial Custom Roadster with LeBaron coachwork, one of the premier coach builders of the era.
Yes.
This car is one of the most rakish cars of its time. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about it is it's a little bit of a period custom, right?
Most definitely. I mean, the car is just purely aesthetically. If you look at the car, it is one of the most beautiful cars of that era. Super long and low, and it has this phenomenal V windshield and disappearing top, and it looks sensational with the top up or down. One of the prettiest roadsters there is from the classic era. I mean, any standard Chrysler Imperial from that era is beautiful, but then you look at this car and it's on a whole different level. What's fun is, for many years we didn't really know when this was done. Was it done at the factory because it's so well done? But now, through the help of various researchers, we know that it was done by the first owner, who was really obviously a passionate car guy in his own right, Dr. Whelan. And he ordered the car very specifically as it was, and then made had some things clearly in mind. He wanted a V windshield, so he got an Auburn style V windshield. It's probably an Auburn windshield. And customized the top to go down. And the fact that all this is done by the first owner in period in the 30s is really, it's great. I mean, it's just a really wonderful part of its history. And the fact that he was so specific, it really makes this car quite interesting. And the other thing I love is it's got the whole car is lowered a bit and has a beautiful chromed front axle. And so there's it is a large, customized, Chrysler hot rod done by the first owner.
I'm glad you said the words hot rod.
Yeah.
Because it really is. It's got that touch.
Yeah. In
a time when hot rodding hadn't been coined as such.
Definitely. No. I mean, this was hot rodding really hit its strides 40s and really 50s and later. But there were, certainly people that were customizing and wanting to improve designs in period. And that's not talked about that much these days. And this is an example where it should be, and it should be celebrated and recognized. And this car is so much better for it. But yet it's so pure because it is still exactly as the first owner wanted it. And it's basically an unrestored car from not from when it was new, but from early on. It's not largely been restored, and I personally don't think it should be restored. It's in fantastic condition. I think it should stay just like it is.
Couldn't agree more. And you also mentioned that it looks as good with the top up as it does down.
Yeah,
which is quite a trick for that time.
Yeah.
Because most of these cars looked a little bit frumpy or a little bit unfinished with the top up.
Yes, definitely.
This one is as sexy as it could get.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I think I prefer it with the top up, but I'm not sure. I don't
Me
know.
too.
You know, it's gorgeous.
Me too.
Really, really sinister looking.
Wonderful car. And I just want to give some specs if that's okay, David.
Absolutely.
It's got the 384 cubic inch inline L head 8-cylinder engine, single barrel Stromberg,
Yep.
150 horsepower, 4-speed manual gearbox, 4-wheel drum brakes.
Yeah.
We're coming into that era with this car where four-wheel drums were now standard,
Yes.
especially on a car of this stature.
Yes.
Like I said, rakish, tiny, tiny doors. And if you look at the overall length of the car, not just the wheelbase, but the overall length, the doors seem like telephone booth doors.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it works.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and the another nice few interesting specs there. It's got hydraulic drum brakes, which was quite a advanced feature for the period, and a 4-speed transmission. A lot of classics from that era had 3 speeds. Another nice aesthetic touch is the tufted top of the cockpit. Almost, I don't know if it was, well, it certainly had to have influence from the aircraft industry of the late 20s, where the cockpit was, surrounded with a
combing.
tufted, combing, exactly.
Yeah.
And it has that, which just is inviting. It has a great look to it.
It's a tuck and roll all around the dash.
Yeah.
The dashboard is rather plain for a car of this cost.
Yes.
It's a black dash, simple gauges, no like machine turned stainless or anything like that, but it definitely has an aviation feel, like you say.
Completely. So. And again, almost understated hot rod look to it. Not overly decorated like some of the other luxury cars from the period, Cadillacs or Packards or something that had beautiful dashes in their own right, but this is a very plain and beautiful look.
Very businesslike.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, you want to give one of your picks, David?
Sure. So Mark, definitely had a love and a passion for the brass era cars, early cars, and there are a number of them in this sale. He had a clear passion for Ford, so there's everything from an early Model A, lots of Model Ts, a very rare Model K Ford, and that the Model K was a car that was owned and featured in Henry Austin Clark's collection. And Mark always gravitated toward, and I realized this, but it was really not until we were entrusted with this sale that I really came to realize how important that was to him. Provenance of certain collectors, and I knew it when I would speak with him and we'd talk cars and everything else, but I really saw it as looking at the entire collection how important it was. If someone great owned the car and it was a car that he recognized in their collection, I think it was an automatic hook for him. I probably should have known that when selling cars to him.
Right.
I should have realized it. But so anyway, this Model K came from Henry Austin Clark's collection, and it was featured there. And actually, Mark bought it from me when I worked at Christie's years ago in the 90s. And it's a fantastic car. The Model K was an interesting part of history in that Henry did not really want to produce a luxury car. This was prior to the Model T, and he was all about mass producing low cost cars, of course, which is what Ford became famous for. But his directors and financiers at the time were feeling that he should produce a large 6 luxury car, and so he really, really reluctantly produced the Model K. And it was a flop. Great car, but financial flop. And I think primarily because Henry wasn't behind it in a lot of ways. But they're incredible cars, very large, very imposing, very un-Ford-like. And this is one of the great Model Ks, so it's in the collection. But then there are some other great early brass cars. There's a London to Brighton eligible 1904 Pope Hartford. Super, super original car. That also was once part of the Henry Austin Clark collection. There is a white steam car, 1907, and this car is identical to the one that President Taft had. This was owned by the DuPont family, and it's one of the largest brass era cars. It's just a massive car, very, very imposing. 1907 steam car, one of only two known. And for those people into steam automobiles, this is one of the highest, best sort of steam cars you can get. And there are only two properly known ones, and this is one of them. So it's certainly going to be exciting to see it come to market.
Fantastic. And for those of you looking along online, the 1907 Ford Model K Touring is lot number 29. And let me find that white.
That is lot 59.
Okay, the white is lot 59.
Yep.
You mentioned President Taft's white.
Mm-hmm.
There's a famous photograph of it.
Yeah.
In front of a building in Washington. I'm not quite sure where. I don't know that it's the White House. It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
But the car, the chauffeur is in the car, and it is a locomotive.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that car is believed to be the one that's in the Henry Ford Museum now in Dearborn. This one, as I say, was owned by DuPont, but is identical to that car. And it has a great long history, all the way known from new. Such an important car. It's been so fun to catalog all of this collection because each of these cars has an interesting story to tell. They were owned by great people. They're rare examples. They're, Mark collected special models and, cars with great histories. And so,
historical significance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's been really fun to study and celebrate them.
David, do you find there's a renewed interest in brass and nickel era cars?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest misnomer is that as we progress in time, people always say, well, the new collectors, they only collect what's contemporary, and they don't relate back to these older cars, and some of that is true. There's no doubt, certainly, but we also find that there are a lot of collectors that they start off collecting something new, and then they go to a car show, and they bring a new car and it looks very similar to a lot of the other new cars that are there, or and they look at something different, or they get an exposure to some of these spectacular early cars. And there are very ordinary, mundane cars that don't capture their attention, but then there's usually something that's interesting and different and does. And the high performance, beautiful cars from the pre-war era are very exciting to look at, extremely exciting to ride in or drive, very engaging. And relative to so many contemporary cars these days, not a huge amount of money. Yes, they can be valuable, but they're not, the price of contemporary Ferraris and Porsches and Mercedes and Paganis and things like that is very, very high, and you can have a nice collection of some of these cars for the price of some of those individual cars. So people are realizing that.
In fact, you can get into a very nice Model T for very little money.
Yes.
For under $15,000 in some cases.
Most definitely.
It opens a different kind of motoring experience up to a person who's interested in discovering that.
Yes. Most definitely. The other, I think the other thing is that people have this sense that it's hard to work on those cars, or that they're not fun to drive. And, that's always a matter of opinion, but I think working on them can be fairly easy and easy for a lot of people and fairly intuitive. And you don't have to have a factory authorized computer and things like that, obviously. Right. But then as far as usage, so many contemporary cars are not really fun and exciting until you get up to 100 miles an hour, or, get there very quickly. And so these other cars can be a lot of fun at lower speeds and still, extremely exciting if you drive them as they were meant to be driven on their limits and really explore them. They can be a lot of fun.
Particularly the open cars, which are a scream at 40 miles an hour.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. Tremendous fun.
I'm going to adjust my mic boom 1 second.
Just tell me if you want me to change position or anything. Okay.
You're doing terrific, and you sound really good. You have a good voice for this, too, by the way. I know you've spent...
Face for radio.
Well, you've spent so many hours on the dais.
Yeah.
And by the way, that takes some stamina.
It takes stamina and, It does take stamina. Yeah.
Have you lost your voice during an auction?
I've come close a couple times. Hot tea is a good thing for that.
Right.
That really helps.
Right.
They say probably whiskey, but I don't know. Then things would devolve into
Oh, yeah.
other things. That's for
You want the money
wholesale.
coming in, not going out.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, usually we're pretty good. And, my voice is one thing, but of course our auctioneer, Charlie Ross, that's
Oh, yes.
far more important for him to be heard and seen and vocalized.
He's fantastic.
He is incredible.
He's a John Houseman type.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I love it.
He is,
That kind of distinctive.
yeah.
There's a reason you have that guy on board.
Oh, he is the best there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely.
Well, David, my next pick is Lot 36, which is a little bit of an infamous car. 1934 Mercedes-Benz 500K
Yeah.
open touring car.
Yeah, I mean, it's original owner was Rudolf Hess, famous member of the Nazi Party. It was his car, so it's quite historic. Just on its own right, separate from his ownership, it is quite an important Tourenwagen coachwork by Sindelfingen. That's the factory coach builder. It's in an extremely sporty 500K. So, I think it's quite desirable just in and of itself, that from that point of view. The Hess ownership is an interesting layer of history on top of it. So, I think it'll be interesting to see who's bidding on it and how they react to it.
Yes, absolutely. How would you characterize the Mercedes-Benz 500s and 540s of the era? Because, they're big, heavy cars. They're extremely powerful.
Yes.
But they're certainly not nimble like a British, like a
British or Italian sports car.
Riley
Yeah.
or an Alfa,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a different design philosophy.
Yeah, that was, Teutonic design at its zenith in the 1930s. You can be a Mercedes person or not a Mercedes person, and I definitely am. And one thing that draws me to the incredible brand, I mean, here's the mark that has started it all, that's been there from the beginning, but they always built beautiful cars, and 500Ks and 540Ks are sensational, stylish cars. Yes, big, yes, imposing, but still they have a flair of beauty and flow to them. This car is an 8-cylinder engine, supercharged.
And once again, David, hydraulic brakes on this car.
Yeah, hydraulic brakes, a rear swing axle, which is, very advanced for the period. The other thing I think that drew Mark Smith to this car was long-term ownership. The fellow that he got it from had it for, nearly 50 years. And so, again, extremely original. A lot of the interior is original on the car. And it's, one of only 5 known, super desirable body style.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And, the 500Ks and the 540Ks, they have these pipes coming out of the side, big V radiator, pretty low slung car in a lot of ways. I mean, they're handsome.
They're commanding. They
Yes.
say, get out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've arrived and get out of the way.
Yes. Well, where do you want to take it next, David? Do you have another pick?
Well, we can talk about the Lincoln Zephyr, the twin grill.
Yeah, the twin grill. So this is a one-off.
Mm-hmm.
It almost looks like a factory job, though.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so well done. It's lot 45 in our sale. Very Art Deco. And it was owned for many years and sort of a fixture in the collection of Leroy Hartung out of Chicago, who was he was a character. He would scour the junkyards and pick up these treasures from the Midwest, and just would take them back to his warehouse in Chicago. And this car came from his collection, and it's just a wild looking car. It's a car with 2 separate front grills that are parallel. So it looks like 2 cars almost cut in half. I mean, it's very, very unusual looking.
The standard unmodified Lincoln Zephyr had, I would call it almost a shark nose prow.
Yeah.
Right. If anybody's seen a Zephyr or even a let's say a 39 or 44, do you know what I'm talking about with that nose? Ostensibly, this one was modified to improve the cooling.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know that they succeeded, but it certainly is wild looking.
Yeah.
Zephyrs themselves are fairly elegant cars,
Yeah.
especially with an all steel body of that period. You know, it doesn't have that bustle back, or they're not frumpy cars.
No.
They're quite shapely.
Yeah. No, the styling on them in general is absolutely, beautiful and very, very well done. The twin grille is so well executed that the first time I saw the car, it was at the Hartung collection, and I had never seen it before, but it clearly was done by a coach builder, or it had to be, it was done to the highest level. It looks like it was done by the factory. I mean, it's the level and the finish and the detail is unparalleled.
It almost makes me wonder if, it had had a collision in period and someone just went on a flight of fancy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, something like that. It could have been a body shop's promotional vehicle. It could have been a dealership's promotional vehicle, maybe a radiator shop's promotional vehicle. I don't know. But it's done to a very high level. Somebody spent a lot of money doing that in period.
Absolutely. My notes on this car are odd but intriguing, clearly well-built modifications of an already elegant car. So that kind of sums it up.
Yep.
You want to do lot 54?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
All right, David, lot 54 is our next pick, and that's a 1934 Lincoln Model KB 7-passenger touring.
Mm-hmm.
I think most experts would agree it either matched or in some cases surpassed other fine cars, its contemporaries.
Definitely, yeah.
And the KB was a continuation of that, bigger, better, 12-cylinder.
Yeah, the KB was at the top of the line. Yeah, the Ks were V8s, beautifully done with. They were famous for the fork and blade connecting rods. The quality, the design, the fit and finish of a Lincoln of this period is unparalleled. And the KB, being the 12, was the top of the line and enabled them to have more extravagant coachwork and greater power of course by the 12-cylinder engine. So the KBs were owned by the ultra wealthy, and this car is a great example. It's a 7-passenger, extremely original again, which is just phenomenal. But it was originally owned. The first owner was the husband of Alta Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller's daughter. So his daughter, her husband, ordered this car. He was a client of Lincoln and of Ford, and they built the car specifically for him. The Rockefeller family, and they've always been important. But in the 1930s, when John D. Rockefeller's daughter or son-in-law call and order a car, you pay attention. So this car had certainly been foisted upon with a lot of attention and factory detail done to it. So really fantastic car, really historic KB.
And this is where we begin to see the influence of streamlining on Ford and Lincoln products.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, for example, the older style fenders are gone. Now we have partially enclosed, what I would call partial pontoon fenders.
Yeah. Yep.
Definitely smoother coachwork, more integrated in every way.
Flowing.
Flowing.
Yeah. Skirted fenders. The fenders drop down in the front. Everything's a little more flowing. The radiator is V'd and tilted forward. You're definitely seeing the mid-30s and what was to come, certainly in the Lincoln line and, of course, in the Ford line, which they were parallel and they complement each other. So it's also fun. In this collection, we have V8 Fords and Lincolns, and you see the baby version and the grown-up version in these cars. And the styling is so complementary. Each has its own unique features, but they're clearly the same DNA. And it's at the encouragement of Edsel Ford. This was his project. You could see that his vision and what they were pushing for came through so clearly and successfully.
The other thing that's interesting about this car is that it has, not unlike other cars of its day, it has fairly bright paint.
Yes,
but it's almost an emerald metallic.
Yeah, really an unusual color. You're correct in pointing that out. I mean, most cars of this period were often dark greens, blacks, grays, pretty subdued colors. Not to say that there weren't occasionally certainly bright cars, but usually the lighter cars were creams or tans or possibly a muted yellow. This car being in this, blue aqua metallic was really extraordinary.
And it's risky. It's
absolutely.
risky on a car of this size.
Yeah.
That much bright color. And as you say, there are particularly some Cadillacs and Packards out there that are quite brightly colored.
Yeah.
And then there were also the Ruxtons, which were super wild with their triple tone paint jobs.
Yes.
But this Lincoln, this metallic, like you say, or blue or green or whatever you want to characterize it as, it works.
Yeah, most definitely.
Oh, another detail on this car are the fan-shaped front windows. It's a half window.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it does roll up.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, Lincoln's quality is unparalleled. They have this beautiful, as you say, the fan shape, the quarter window that is so practical when you're driving an open car, a Phaeton, to have that great quarter window, is super important. But they're integrated fully into the door. They hinge with the door, and if you want to roll them down, they go completely enclosed. So very advanced design. I mean, Packards from the same period, for example, to have a wind wing, it was bolted onto the side of the windshield. By comparison to the Lincoln, in terms of quality and engineering and finish, it looks rather sort of like an afterthought, whereas in the Lincoln, it's just beautifully part of the car. It's so well done.
Yeah, really well integrated. And I think in inclement weather, it would have afforded quite a bit of protection compared even to a side curtain, perhaps.
Definitely. Oh, no.
So,
yeah, they're very practical and yet aesthetically pleasing.
Well, what do we have next here, David?
All right. Okay. So one of my favorite cars in the sale was Lot 70. It's the 1924 Packard Single 8 136 Sport Touring. This is one of the prettiest cars from this era. Certainly one of the prettiest American cars from this era. Anyone who sees this car too, just is captivated by it. If you like cars from this period, it's absolutely stunning. It's got this super narrow. The whole car is very narrow, but the coachwork is very, very narrow. And I assumed it was Packard coachwork, but as we researched it and I spoke with true connoisseurs who knew a lot more about these cars than we did, it was built by Pullman, who built the Pullman coaches, the trains and everything. They did some coach work on cars, and they did the coach work on these cars. So it's got this absolutely spectacular, narrow, very, very sporty coach work, 4-passenger Phaeton. And the colors on this car are sensational as well. It's got two-tone gray and black with sort of a deep vermilion or red wheels and accents, and just everything about it. And then on top of all of that, it is incredibly original and well preserved. It looks like a high-speed aero of some kind. I mean, from the period, it's just really beautifully designed and finished.
Some might even call it a torpedo body.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In 1924, you could order your Packard with wooden wheels, wire wheels, or disc wheels.
Yeah.
And for my money, it's got to be the discs, and this car has them.
Oh, yeah. It's funny because cars from this period were in transition. Of course, we were coming out of the wood wheel era, going into wire wheels. But there was this brief period where disc wheels were a bit of the rage, and it's unfortunate because they didn't last that long, and yet they look phenomenal. And I agree. I mean, a disc wheel on this car, you could get it with wood wheels or with wire wheels as well, and it just wouldn't be as dramatic and racy looking. It just looks so slick with those disc wheels.
Completely agree. Even the wheels on this car are a vermilion red, but even if they were black or gray, they would still look fantastic.
Oh, yeah. No, that's definitely... whoever spec'd this car out in this color, they knew exactly how a car should look. I mean, it's sensational,
The kind of guy I'd like to hang out with.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
You mentioned Pullman.
Yeah.
Interesting crossovers in the era. Pullman building bodies. Also, the Budd Company.
Yes.
Building all sorts of bodies, whether they be commercial or I think they even did some passenger cars.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of interesting.
I find that part of automotive history, it's really part of American industrial history, which is really part of American history, I find it really fascinating to see all these companies were intertwined. Of course, Packard was building aircraft engines during World War I and famously during World War II. So leaders of those industries were relying on their colleagues in other areas to supply and build and produce whatever they could for their products. And it makes sense. So, this sense that whatever the company is, Packard, Pierce Arrow, Lincoln, that they produced everything, we tend to just go with the mark and the brand and think just wholly about them. But when you really realize all of the various people that were involved, the designers, the suppliers, there was a lot of commonality. And we see that also especially in European cars. You really dissect a Ferrari, you can see there's so many, this is before Fiat became part of Ferrari, there's so many Fiat parts, there's so many common parts that weren't actually Fiat, they were Italian suppliers. So I find that part of studying a car really interesting and fascinating.
I think it's easy for us to forget because it's been so long. But at one time, from the Northeast all the way to the Great Lakes, was one massive industrial empire.
Yes.
From Dayton Engineering Laboratories Company, AC Delco, to, let's see, Studebaker.
Yes.
To, you mentioned earlier, Pope in Hartford, Connecticut.
Yes.
What we now call the Rust Belt was this huge font of industrial might.
Yeah, and not just the products, but everything behind the history of these companies. Pope's a great example. Colonel Pope was in the Civil War, came out of the Civil War, and really being a visionary, noticed the bicycle was something that was quite important, had a future. So he invested heavily, became a multimillionaire many times over in the bicycle industry, leading the manufacture of bicycle frames, the Columbia bicycle, the Pope bicycle. And then he was building everything. He wanted vertical integration, building tires and tubes and everything. And then, of course, was pushing for great roads for bicycles. And then, obviously, when the automobile started taking off, he looked toward the automobile. So his imprint and that history is very, very interesting. He thought that the automobile should have a patent that he could own the rights to. So he was the main money behind the Selden patent. And anyone who was manufacturing an automobile in the U.S. was supposed to pay royalties to the Selden patent. Most of the manufacturers did. Some of them didn't. The most notable one that didn't was
Henry Ford.
There we go. Yeah.
David, I did an episode, I think about 2 years ago, on the Selden patent.
Yeah.
It's called Henry Ford's Fight.
Yes.
Fascinating story.
Yeah. Yeah. So, incredibly fascinating story. Really interesting had it turned out differently. I always wondered if Colonel Pope were a younger man, would it have turned out differently? He, when he died in 1909, it kind of sort of, I think the family that they had gone through a recession, the Pope family, they had a lot of problems with their manufacturing. I think the sort of fight behind the court case that they were fighting against Henry Ford died a death. And of course, Ford took off with the Model T and the rest is certainly history. But, Pope's influence and imprint, not just with the Pope Hartford, but all these, he had 6 different brands, a Toledo, a Waverly, all kinds of different brands and for types of the market that he wanted to serve. I mean, it was the GM, the first GM prior to GM of its type.
Well said. David, let's talk about your personal story and the origins of Gooding & Company.
Well, I grew up in the car hobby, in the car industry. My father was a museum curator at various automotive museums, the Harrah Museum, the Crawford Museum in Cleveland, and the Nethercutt Museum. So I grew up as a kid going to these museums. I was left there at night while he was working, scouring the collections and the libraries. So I had a kind of an unusual education, but I was always brought up to think that I shouldn't work in the car industry because I love cars. I want to collect them, but my dad wasn't into the buying and selling of cars really. So out of college, I was desperate to pay my rent. I needed a job, and a friend said there's an opening at Christie's, their car department. They basically, at the time, their car department had vacated and set up a competing company, so they needed some talent or people that knew about cars. So I applied for a job and got a job there and did the first ever auction of Christie's and the first ever auction at the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance, and that was in August of 1990.
I hope that people can relate to these cars. Certainly they're not inexpensive, right?
No.
They're not reachable for a lot of people, but
yes.
Because a Van Gogh is not affordable for you, does that mean that it's outside of your realm of appreciation?
No, not at all. That's that we have lots of people that come to our events that may not be bidding on a car, that may not be buying a car, but they want to come and look at them, study the cars, watch the market transpire in front of them. That's what's so exciting about the auctions is it is the market speaking in real time in front of your eyes. But really to study the cars, to read the catalog descriptions, to discuss them with other car enthusiasts. People call us car experts, and that's something I shy away from because we are specialists, but we're constantly learning about these cars. And, I've been doing this all my life. I'm well into my 50s now, and I'm still learning about cars that I've, theoretically should know a lot about, but I still learn new things about them. And people will point out things to me on these magnificent machines that I had not noticed before, or so it's a great learning process and very gratifying.
Absolutely. It's one of the best things about the car hobby or collecting, or being in the position to make a business out of this, is that you never stop learning. There's always another page to turn.
Most definitely. Yeah.
David, if you could pick one car that you've sold in your career,
yeah,
whether it's your favorite, the most memorable, what car was it?
Limiting it to one is quite difficult. I'm gonna limit it to three. That
we can do three.
Yeah, they're all related though. The first one is the 1935 Duesenberg Mormon Meteor.
Oh yeah,
that was in our very first sale, the Gooding & Company's first sale ever. It was our sale at the 2004 Pebble Beach event, and this car had not come up. Extremely important Duesenberg. It was built for the Bonneville Speed Flats, and it set 24-hour speed record with Ab Jenkins. It had been owned by one family since 1959 or 60, and the fact that as we were setting up as a company, this family and a friend of theirs who really pushed very hard for us to have it, the fact that we had that car in our very first sale was a big deal. We didn't take it lightly, and we're very proud of it. And it, at the time, set a world record for a Duesenberg, a world record for an American car that stood for many years. It was just one of the all-time great Duesenbergs. Now, the next car is another Duesenberg. That is the Whittel Coupe, perhaps the most beautiful Duesenberg, one of the most beautiful classic era cars. And we were consigned that car in 2011, and that succeeded the Mormon Meteor in setting a record for a Duesenberg and an American car. So that the Whittel Coupe sold for over $10 million, which was an extraordinary price at the time. Still is an extraordinary price, but at the time, I think most people were expecting that car to bring probably $4 to $6 million, and it brought 10. Like the Mormon Meteor, totally unique. The Whittel Coupe, built for George Whittel, just one of the most gorgeous and beautiful cars, just a hauntingly beautiful car, a one-off Murphy Coupe with a polished aluminum hardtop and these gorgeous chrome stripes down the middle and a patent leather interior. We had so many people remark, there were many people that said, I'm not a pre-war sort of person. I'm not a Duesenberg sort of person. I collect this. They said, I don't care. That is the most beautiful car I've ever seen. They were struck by it. And
what was George Whittell's claim to fame?
So Whittell came from a wealthy family. He grew up quite wealthy, sort of a robber baron type family.
So he was the scion of...
He was the scion of this wealthy family, and very astutely got out of the stock market just before its crash and invested in property in California and Nevada. It was the largest landowner in around Lake Tahoe, and indulged his passion and had 6 custom Duesenbergs made to his order, and wild airplanes, the highest, beautiful aircraft and boats to the highest order. So he was a man who loved the finest bespoke toys.
A sportsman in the true sense.
Definitely. Yeah. And then the final car, which of course relates to the other two, is the Gary Cooper SSJ.
Fantastic car.
Absolutely incredible. And similar to the other two, no one was expecting this car to come on the market. They only built 2 of the SSJs. It's considered the ultimate Duesenberg, the shortest chassis, sportiest Duesenberg, short wheelbase, supercharged engine, but the twin carbureted supercharged engine. They only built 6 of the twin carbureted cars, the Mormon Meteor being one of them, the 2 SSJs being 2 of the other 6. They built one for Gary Cooper and one for Clark Gable.
Yeah.
And
Coop and Gable were both like dyed-in-the-wool car guys.
Dyed-in-the-wool car guys, friendly competitors, obviously competing for roles on stage and for the spotlight, and then both, car guys as well. So when Coop got one, Gable had to get one, and they are just unbelievably good-looking. Again, it's a Duesenberg hot rod. It's a shortened car. It's all hood, and the engines are 400 horsepower. This is a 400 horsepower 1935 car.
Astonishing.
Yeah, wonderful to drive. And this car had been part of the Briggs Cunningham collection for many, many years.
Another sportsman.
Yeah, phenomenal collector and sportsman who won the America's Cup. So he had the car. Then Miles Collier owned the car. So nobody thought it was coming to market. It really stunned everybody when it came to market. And, we said that the price would, we thought, exceed $10 million. And there was some precedence from that, being the Whittell Coupe, and then, of course, the Mormon Meteor. These are the other great Duesenbergs. And so it was quite astonishing and gratifying, not because of the number as much as just the attention and the result when it brought $22 million. Again, broke that American car record, that pre-war car record, the Duesenberg record. It blew everybody's mind, but deservedly so. I mean, what an incredible car. So those are my top 3.
That had to have been electrifying for you.
It was. I mean, the whole process was when we were entrusted with the sale, it was just fun. It was, of course, a big responsibility, a giant responsibility, but cataloging the cars and having the experience of driving each of them, getting some real good seat time in them.
I was going to say spending time with them.
Yeah.
Let's be real about this. Possessing them for a brief period, but really fun.
Yeah. No, we had both the Whittell Coupe and the SSJ were, just feet from where we're doing this interview here. It was fun with both cars to walk by them every day, just sort of spend time staring at them. Some cars, the more you look at them, the more you go, oh, I would change this. Oh, that doesn't. Those 2 cars, in particular, the Whittell and the SSJ, they just get better. The more you look at them, you walk away from them, and you absolutely have to look over your shoulder and look back at them. They just take your breath away.
Wonderful. Well, David, listen, I'm really excited about the Mark Smith estate auction. Can you bid online?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So if you just go to our website, goodandco.com, you can go and you can set it up and do online bidding and telephone bidding, and absolutely.
Excellent. All right. The Estate of Mark Smith auction. It's April 7th, 2023. in Lynchburg, Virginia. But if you can't be there, bid online, goodingco.com. David Gooding, thank you so much for having me in today.
Oh, my pleasure, Maurice. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. If you like what you've heard, don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a single episode. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave me 5 stars and a quick review. Visit buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage and support the show with a donation. I'll see you back here on Wednesday, April 5th for some more muscle car talk with the one and only rock and roll good times gearhead direct from Dallas, Texas, Richard Rawlings of Gas Monkey Garage. So until then, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.